Mm.
And I think a mindset that recruiters need to think of is it's like you're running a pipeline. It's not like a race, like an individual race. You need to think of all of your work. And this could work, this could scale up to your entire career, never mind just in your one job. But you need to think of recruitment as an everlasting pipeline.
Welcome to the All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. I'm your host, Lydia, and this week we have Luke Eaton of WellTech. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Thank you very much for having me on.
So, Luke, what's kept you in the talent space? We spoke pre-show, and you've been in several roles before WellTech. How have you kept up with the changes in this industry so far?
Yeah, well, that's a really good opening question. So there's been so much change over the past few years. So in terms of my background, obviously, for the past sort of 8 to 10 years, my role has been to embed into hyper-growing businesses who have recently got some kind of VC backing or investment, and just set them up for scale. So change is very much a core part of my role because I'm there to affect a transformation. I'm in a change role. In terms of how do we keep up, that's an interesting question. One of the main things, ways in which I've kept up with the trends in talent and actually the methodologies that create the best results for these fast growing businesses is very much using more advanced methodologies from other parts of the business world, bringing it into recruitment, and using them and using data to drive best practices to decide what we do next, not arguments from authority, but arguments from data. So essentially a lot of what we need to advance or to become more sophisticated as a talent function, it's already been there. We don't have to create things from scratch. If you look at DevOps processes, manufacturing processes, they're excellent at reducing waste. We can use principles like that in recruitment, project management best practices, change management best practices. They're all there for the taking. So the ways I've really kind of kept up with the pace, and I would say sort of how talent has evolved into more of a business critical function. I think maybe 10 years ago, it was viewed as very much a service, an internal service. Where in actual fact now, I think the businesses that are doing best, particularly the ones that are scaling quickly, are the ones who are bringing talent leaders into the C-suite. And the chief people officers are coming from recruitment backgrounds instead of HR backgrounds and things like this. So I've really been keeping up by essentially learning from the more sophisticated business units and the ones that have been strategic partners for longer, and using those principles, bringing them into recruitment, and using data to help drive a cycle of continuous improvement. So we're always being more efficient. We're always getting more from the same level of effort, and we're scaling up the processes that work and scaling down the ones that don't.
In terms of the methodology that comes from different business units or different kinds of industries, as you were saying, what might be some of the more recent methodologies that you've used in talent transformation projects?
Yeah, sure. Well, my experience is very much kettled into that business that is suddenly changing gears and they're going up. They're scaling pretty significantly. I would say one of the most underused but impactful areas of the business world that needs to come into recruitment, and I've had a lot of success with, is lean and the theory of constraints. So if your viewers aren't aware, fundamentally, if you were to build a car, there is a set of best practices that essentially says, how do we get as many car parts turned into cars within a specific amount of time? Like, what is the mathematics that governs how we reduce waste at every step? And how do we manage capacities versus volume? So you may have heard of something called just-in-time manufacturing. It's how cars can get made. The basics of those best practices have been around for about 60 years. About 25 years ago, software engineers, they realized that by eliminating bottlenecks in the software release process, they can increase the cadence at which they can release software, and to the point where they can release daily, weekly if they want, rather than one big project every 6 months. and that's DevOps, right? So that those processes of manufacturing, those lean processes, have been brought into software development, about 25 years old. Recruitment hasn't really done that yet. We haven't used these methodologies to improve and reduce waste in our own process. And recruitment is still a process, right? It's candidates that go in one end, they go through a series of stages. Those stages require a certain amount of resources, and then out the end comes employees. And if we do that at scale, reducing waste is very lucrative, right? You can save millions of dollars by applying these principles to a recruitment process and reducing waste and increasing efficiency at every stage. So I'd say anyone who really wants to advance their game or needs to help a company scale with the same amount of resources, but do a lot more with it, really look at learning about the basics of the theory of constraints, marginal gains, lean processes. You can buy books on this. There's decades of studies out there, and recruiters can just get out there and start learning and start applying straight away.
Now, applying these methodologies or these principles onto a vertical or an industry or a team, a recruitment team or talent acquisition team that hasn't been perhaps transformed in that manner, what might be some of the challenges that you face in terms of bringing that idea and implementing that, turning that into a standard process or a system?
That's a really good question. A lot of people just want to get into the how-to, but what are the obstacles first? I think is a really sophisticated question. So the main areas of resistance that I see isn't actually at the leadership level, particularly because I work in technology companies where it's actually easier to get buy-in and sponsorship from the CTO because they use the same processes when they build software. So it's actually a benefit when then they don't work too well with recruitment leaders who are using argument from authority and they're using, arguments from their own personal experience, when in actual fact, you can say, hey, this methodology, we're going to increase the cadence and the throughput of this system. That is going to mean that the same money on your P&L, the same budget, you're going to get more hires, or for the same number of hires, do it in less budget, go buy a cool tool, or take your team to Mexico for the weekend. I don't know what he wants to do with his P&L. So you tend to find the most resistance in people leadership and recruiters from the bottom up, mainly because I don't know about yourself, but a lot of recruiters started in agency. And agency, when you first start an agency, I believe that data is kind of used like a weapon. It's like a cudgel to hit you over the head with, right? Arbitrary KPIs. Have you done this many outreach? Have you done this many calls? So when someone comes in who suddenly starts measuring everything and they're changing, there's a lot of resistance because they think I'm there to do damage or to make redundancies. And in actual fact, I'm there to actually empower the individual recruiters. I'm there to empower them with this data. So the first thing I have to do is just treat it like a change management piece. So a lot of over communication with recruiters. I speak to every individual recruiter, the business that I joined, specifically to see where their problems and where their pain points. And then what we can do is we map it out. So I have a hiring manager who, always says no at this stage. And what it means is I need to do 30 screens to fill this role, or I may never fill this role. Like if you start at that pain point, then you can map out their volumes, conversions, capacities at every stage, and then say, right, so this is our conversion. What can we do to improve this conversion by 5%? And then what they do is after 4 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, they actually see the benefit of these little marginal improvements, and also they get time back. So all of the time that they save making that one hire, they can put it into, filling another role, so that their hires go up, improving the quality of the stakeholder communication, some other improvement project, or even just taking time back for themselves to go pick their kids up from school, or to, go to the gym, spend time with their partner, and all the other stuff that you need to be a mentally healthy recruiter long term. So the most resistance is recruiters who maybe lack the understanding of these more advanced concepts, and just bring them on board using what they see already. They're using the pain points they already have. And then, of course, making that transparent so everyone in the team can see how we're measuring, how we're tracking in the future. And then an amazing thing happens is they start improving each other. So instead of me being sort of at the top of some pyramid and having to, work with maybe 20 odd different recruiters, help coach them and bring them up the hill, you start bringing each other up the hill because someone can see maybe my outreach to screen conversion isn't very good, but Jane over there, her outreach to screen is fantastic. So what do? They go talk to Jane before they talk to me. Jane, what on earth are you saying to these candidates that's getting them back to you? Can I use your nurture campaign? And then, of course, that brings the floor up for everyone. And everyone has their own little improvement points. So that's kind of where I start, and how I kind of break that initial resistance is just by just bringing them on the journey from day one, starting with their pain points, and then using my methodologies to solve their problems right in front of their faces. Once you do that, it really does improve the efficiency of the individual, but it also improves the management efficiency because they start improving each other.
And that brings me to the point of data empowering the recruiters, as you talked about. Is this what you mean? It replicates, and the success replicates within the team with data and knowing where the data is taking you. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the best thing about that is that it scales. So an individual recruiter should be empowered to measure the volume of their work every week, the conversions, just a function of their volume, and then the capacity at every stage. And a recruitment team leader, some kind of who manages maybe a small team of recruiters in a small business, or a business like a piece of a business, they should be able to aggregate that and learn from their team and get good insights on how to improve every quarter. And the head right up to the chief people officer, they should be able to aggregate this data up and use it for, yes, performance management. So, hey, this conversion, if you increased it a little bit, then for the same amount of work, you'd get 2-3 more hires a quarter. But also for process improvement, so you can go to the other way and look to your stakeholders and say, look, this is our funnel, this is our data. This specific conversion is costing us this amount of money, and I actually want to max out an ideal model of a scaling company over a 6-year period for about 1,000 technical hires. And all I did was model out based on just the averages, and it was based in the American averages, the operational cost of a hire. And if you increased every stage by 4%, just the conversion by 4%, if you can squeeze 4% out of every little bit, the operational cost, the difference in operational cost over a scaling period, $1.3 million, right? And that's just the operational cost of every recruiter just tweaking up by 4% the conversions at every stage.
That's interesting when you talk about using data and projecting your performance or the success of a team using that data, and also looking at what the actual cost is going to be and what is the savings behind that. So in terms of a recruiter, just using this methodology or adopting this methodology for the first time, what is the sort of mindset that a recruiter needs to have in order to be open enough to take on this kind of different ways of thinking or different approaches towards work?
Mindset's a good way of framing that. I think a lot of individual contributing recruiters, they're on the ground, they're highly operational, they're given a lot of rec load, they have a high rec load, and they're essentially their value to a business in their mind is just how many hires they can make. So they tend to just run at the problems head on, right? Just go through the process that they know well. And if they want to make more hires, then they do more of that. And that we've all been in that situation in the early parts of our careers. We love that. It's high energy, but there comes to a point, I personally have burned out, in the past, like psychologically, I've burned out in a situation like that. It comes to a point where that will happen. So I think the mindset has to be, there's a mindset in DevOps and IT called cattle, not pets, which is I like a way of framing it, which is before DevOps and before the use of systems administrators, and they would love the server, and they would have one server and they would know it inside out and all the little tweaks, and they would treat it like a pet, right? They would know it inside out, and it's very labor intensive to take care of that one server. But in actual fact, if you treat them like cattle, So lots and lots of servers in aggregate. Like, how do you just, you kill this one and you spin up these ones that work and you kill the ones that don't. So if you start treating it like cattle, not pets, then you end up with a much more efficient system because you're just driving inefficiency out of the system. And I think a mindset that recruiters need to think of is, it's like you're running a pipeline. It's not like a race, like an individual race. You need to think of all of your work. And this could scale up to your entire career, never mind just in your one job. But you need to think of recruitment as an everlasting pipeline. So your conversions of outreach to screen, that is something that you should be working on the whole time of your recruitment career, whether you've got a head of paid social media, or whether it's a DevOps engineer, or whether it's a product designer. You're always thinking to yourself, how am I going to get that outreach to screen up? So you're just always thinking about that. And then all of a sudden, the psychological hits that you get when people accept counter offers, they still hurt. Of course they do. We're all recruiters. But they hurt less because it's just more of an industrial process in your mind. So I think that's the first thing you need to do, is like cattle, not pets. Build these pipelines. Don't build really important little one-person races, but build pipelines. And that helps you with your sourcing as well. You will source in a more consistent manner. Your work will be more consistent. And again, recruiters, we have these bad habits from the agency where we're highly target orientated, and there's nothing wrong with that, and highly tenacious, but we're told to smash it, smash the goal. In actual fact, I would rather have a recruiter that carefully meets out, every day a certain amount of work over the period of 6 months, than one person who's just going to absolutely gun it for like a week. Because what you see in the data is, you smash the sourcing for a week, you do loads of sourcing, and then the following week you do lots of screens because you obviously did so many sourcing. But then, I didn't have the time for any sourcing that week because I was doing so many screens. So next week you've got no screens, and you go, oh my God, where am I going to get my screens? I better do lots of sourcing. So you kind of like going this way and that way on the road, trying. What I would rather see, and what is much better for you as a recruiter in terms of building improvements in your game, is I'm going to do enough sourcing to get enough screens, to get enough technical interviews, to get enough final interviews, and then figure out. And then you just have to figure out what's enough, what's my target, and work your way back. So I definitely recommend recruiters start thinking in that more data-driven way. In particular, and this is the last thing I'll sort of say about it, is that it's really important to empower the recruiter with data, is that sliding scale where, let's say you make a series of improvements in your pipeline. Yes, for the same amount of effort, you'll make more hires, and that's what the company wants, and that's what you to a degree want. But you can always look at it the other way. For the same number of hires, do it in less time. Go spend time with your family, go to the gym, whatever, go for a walk, whatever it is. The empowering component is that once you know how to use continuous improvement to that sliding scale between performance and time back for you, like, that's not my sliding scale to use. That's your sliding scale, not mine. So you can say to yourself, hey, I'm gunning for that big promotion, pay reviews in 3 months' time. Maybe you want to ratchet up the performance. Like, what can I improve? And then another time you may say to yourself, do you know what? I need time to myself. Work isn't the biggest priority right now. I want to focus on myself, a sick relative or something. You knowing how much you need to do to hit your target, and with no waste, gives you the maximum amount of time with yourself, with that sick relative or whatever. So that's why I think it's really cool, is that it's not just it's not just some mathematical, inhuman way of dealing with recruitment. It actually boils down to very empowered, personally empowered recruiters. I'll get off my soapbox because I get excited about those types of things.
I like it when you're excited, because there's so much that I'm getting from this. But moving on, so much of what you've just said talks about practices, daily habits of a recruiter switching to something that's far more productive or enriching for them in terms of performance, and also as a professional. So in terms of how does the emphasis on lean recruitment, for example, or data empowering the recruiter, how does this influence the culture within a talent acquisition team?
Oh, that's a really cool question. First of all, I think it makes once everyone gets it, it's a much more open environment, because everyone then has their own metrics, and they have the same methods that they can use. The data that they're measuring is the data that their person sat next to them is measuring, or their colleague, on their team is measuring. So they have a common language, and they have like a common set of principles, and that's when they start to kind of communicate with each other. When the data is transparent, they stop feeling that KPIs are some arbitrary thing. So if they're unable to do the same amount of sourcing as somebody else, it's not the end of the world. As long as they increase conversion somewhere down the funnel, they get the same result. They start realizing that. So in terms of how it affects the culture, it creates an open, transparent culture, which is very good if you're in a tech company, because democratic leadership styles tend to work better in those types of companies. It's how the rest of the business is run. So not being as command and control and being more open and democratic as a leader is very valuable. So when you're confident that they have the principles that they need to talk to each other and make informed decisions about how they work, that makes leadership, like the bandwidth of the leader, just goes right down. You've got so much more time as a leader, because the team is essentially elevating you, and then you can get on to some more things. So that's number one. And then number two, it kicks off a cycle of continuous improvement. Mm. And by that, I mean, this is something you would be doing with the business anyway. But every quarter, let's say we measure conversion, volume, capacity. We look for areas in aggregate that we can improve. And then as a team, we say, right, this quarter, or out of this, what we're going to improve and why. So let's say tech interviews are low, not converting very well. As a team, we can say, why aren't they converting very well? We can have a discussion about that. Could be when maybe we don't have the sourcing strategy. Maybe the candidates aren't good enough. It could be that the candidates aren't prepped well enough. Maybe the interviewers need training. Maybe there's a wait time behind that stage. There's a bottleneck that's annoying the candidates. If a candidate's waiting 3 weeks for an interview, they're probably less likely to put effort into it. Maybe they've already accepted another offer. So you can start to think with the team, like, how are we going to improve in a very specific, very particular way, this very specific, very particular bit of our process. And then we say, right, well, we want to squeeze 4%. So how do we get this from 55% to 59%? And then we agree on a specific thing that we're going to do in the following quarter to bring that conversion up. So let's say we commit to a 30-minute prep session for every candidate 2 days before a tech interview. Okay, that's a very practical thing, right? Cool. All right, and then we can work it out. We can calculate it. What happens if we hit that goal, that conversion target? How many more hires do we make for the same effort? You can work it all the way down the funnel. Depends on the size of the team, obviously, because that dictates the volume. But 4% improvement at that stage, let's say there's like one stage after it and then an offer, you could be talking 5 more hires for, let's say, a team of 4 to 6 recruiters. You could be looking at like 5 more hires per quarter. And then what do we do the following quarter? We do another retrospective, right? How did we do? Let's measure it. What are we going to do this quarter? And round you go. So they start to see things in a cycle of continuous improvement. And that makes the culture much more positive, much more solutions focused, and also really valuable if you're in a tech company, in line with the way the rest of the tech organization works, because that's how they improve their software. They do retrospectives. They use agile project management and things like this. So it means that they get more credibility from their stakeholders, because they see that we're doing recruitment the way they're doing software, and they like that. So does that answer the question?
Yes, it is. That's a great point. And I love how that comes together, especially in the tech space where you're speaking the same language, similar language, essentially. And, that barrier that usually comes in place when you have the people team and the business units talking to each other, or even the product team, engineering, for instance. It's usually, that itself is a space that you have to, a kind of barrier that you have to overcome. But this is a great point that you made, being able to not just speak the business language in terms of dollars and cents, but also in terms of process and in terms of the ways in which systems are being put in place. So this is great. Leo, thanks so much for sharing. The final question is, what advice would you give, having said all this, having gone through the whole, transformative talent transformation angle that we talked about today? What advice would you give someone who's starting out in the people space today?
Oh, okay. What I would say is measure everything. Don't just measure what you're told to measure, or don't just measure what's in the ATS. Get yourself a spreadsheet and measure anything that you find interesting. Just get curious about your own performance. It's very easy to just fall into whatever process that company or that agency gives you. And that's fine. Learn to work that process. But there's nothing stopping you measuring. It's free. Spreadsheets are free, right? So just measure everything and just get curious about your own performance and see, oh, why did it take me that many? Why was that? Why did that only take 2? But why was that harder? Why was this? Why was I look at the role that stressed you out the most, that you were at home, talking to your partner going, God, I could do with a glass of wine after tonight, those types of roles. And I examine it. Why did it annoy me so much? Why did it cause me so much stress? Just get really curious. That's the first thing. And the second thing is just sit next to the best person. One of the best things about recruitment is it's highly meritocratic. If you do something well, you make hires. It's really obvious when if you're a project manager, it's very difficult to speak to another project manager and assess, why was that project good? Why was it complete? There's ways of doing that, but it's much more soft. Recruitment is a little different. There's a lot of soft components to it. The way we do our job is highly emotionally intelligent. But at the end of the day, good recruiters make lots of hires, right? And they do that well and efficiently. So just find whoever's doing the best. Go on the ATS and find it. If it's an agency, it'll probably be up on a board somewhere. If it's internal, it'll be on the ATS somewhere. Sit next to that person, buy them lunch, look at what they do and how they do it and when they do it. Like, do they do everything by email? Are they on the phone to candidates all the time? How often do they speak to stakeholders? When they're on the phone, are they business-like? Are they very, very chummy and friendly? What is it they do? How do they do an offer? Sit on one of their offer calls. Sit on one of their screens. Just get so curious and just get stuck in and learn as much as possible and measure as much as possible. If you can do that, the sort of the feedback loop between you and everyone else in the business gets really, really fast. And then your learning curve gets a lot less steep. You're learning way quicker. So I think that's probably the best thing to do. And curiosity in a recruiter is probably the core sensibility, I think, in my experience. So anything that just piques your curiosity, just keep that fire, that mad curiosity, keep that burning, and you'll do pretty well as a recruiter, I think.
So there's retrospective, and there's introspective, and there's also sharing, and there's plenty of ways to really keep that process improvement happening for recruiters themselves, and not just the process, and then it lends the benefit to one another. And that's great. And thank you so much, Luke, for these insights, and especially your time today. And I understand you're pretty busy this week, so drop us your contact details, Luke, so that the audience, whoever's listening in, might want to contact you or pick up a conversation with you.
Yeah, I'll send over my contact details. It's easiest to just grab me on LinkedIn. I love having conversations with anyone, so feel free to grab me on LinkedIn anytime.
Thanks again, Luke. And we have been in conversation with Luke Eaton of WellTech. Thank you for joining us. And remember to subscribe. Stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.